Hello class, this is the Chapter 8 Restricting Rows and Sorting Data video lecture for CIT 171. In this chapter we're going to be talking about how to query your Oracle database and also restrict it and only show, pull back or query certain rows or records in that database, and also talk about how to sort that data. The other thing we're going to do in this video lecture is I'm going to walk you through briefly how to use SQL Developer, which is the new tool that we're going to be using for the rest of the semester to administer and query our database. Up to this point, we've been using SQL Plus, which is a command line interface tool. Now we're going to be using SQL Developer, which is a graphical user interface. It's much more user-friendly. It's important to get started on SQL Plus just so you understand the basics of Oracle and how to do the command line interface. But now we're going to be moving into SQL Developer because we're going to be working with more data, writing longer queries. It makes it much easier to see the data we're trying to look at. So without further ado, let's go ahead and look at SQL Developer. Now, in previous weeks, I have given you the instructions on how to actually download and install SQL Developer. You don't really install it per se. You really take a zip file and unzip it to a location on your PC and launch the program from there. So where I choose to unzip mine is in my root C drive in a folder called Tools. And then I unzip it to a folder called SQL Developer. Inside here, you'll see all the folders that are part of the SQL Developer application. And here at the bottom, you'll see SQLDeveloper.exe, which is the executable for SQL Developer. So to run SQL Developer, all you need to do is unzip the file that you downloaded and then run the executable, and it will open SQL Developer. We'll give it just a minute here to load, and we'll talk about how to set up a connection to our Scott database. So you can see when this loads over here in the left side on this in this connections window, I already have a few connections set up from previous courses. You won't have anything listed here. So in order to set up a new connection, you'll want to click this green plus sign. And this is where you actually create a new connection to an Oracle database. So you'll give it a name. I named mine CIT 171-Scott so that I know with this connection I'm always logging in with the Scott user. I'm going to click on this connection. It will load what I have populated in this connection. So you want to give it a name. It can really be any name you want it to be. Then under authentication, you're going to use the Scott username. And I leave the password blank, although you may want to type in the password of Tiger, T-I-G-E-R, and save the password. That way it doesn't prompt you every time. I typically leave it blank just because out of habit I like to type in the password so I remember what I'm logging into. Down here in the connection type, you'll want to keep it as basic, and you'll want to put the host name as localhost because you are running this Oracle server on your local machine. The port is 1521, and the SID needs to be XE, which is for Express Edition, which is what you all have installed. So after this point, you can go ahead and you can test your connection and also click connect here. If you have any problems, please email me. It could be something as simple as restarting the Oracle service on your PC by going to the services you can just type in services here in the Windows search, opening up services, and then restarting the Oracle service. But please email me if you have any issues getting connected to your Scott database. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this, and then I'm going to go back over here to my connections. After you set up your connection, you will see it listed over here on the left side. You'll want to click the plus sign. For me, since I didn't save a password, it's going to prompt me. I'm going to type in Tiger, hit OK. And you give it a few seconds and it will load, and it will show you all of the different components of your Oracle database: the tables, views, indexes, packages, procedures, functions. Some of these things we haven't discussed yet in this course, such as functions and stored procedures. But once we do, that's where they'll be stored. Now we have started creating sequences, and sequences will be listed under here once you create a sequence. So if I click on the plus sign beside tables, you'll see all of the database tables in our CIT 171 Justly Books database. So author, books. Now you can click on the plus sign beside any of these tables and you'll also be able to see all of the columns that are in that table: ISBN number, title, pub date. So it makes it much easier to see the structure of your database. You can also click on the type, the name of the table itself. It'll give you even more information on the columns, what their data type is it nullable, is there a default value. You can also look in here and you can preview the data that's actually in the table. You can look at constraints, if there are any constraints set up on the database. We've talked about constraints a lot. Looks like there's a unique key constraint set up on the title of in the table. So the title has to be unique. Lots of cool things that you can see here in SQL Developer about your table. So that is how you get the connection set up, see the tables. Now, what if you actually want to query the database, which is what we need to do for Chapter 8 and for the rest of our work here in this course. So there's a couple of different ways you can do it. Whenever you click the plus sign, by default, it opens a new window over here that's a query worksheet. You can see it has the connection name at the top here. The other thing that you can do is up here you'll see a little green SQL man that says SQL on his sign. You can click the down arrow and you can click the connection that you want to open a new worksheet for. So if I want to click Scott again, I can create as many query windows as I want, which is sometimes helpful if you want to query the database, look at the results, run another query, but keep the same results up. That's a good way to do it, so you can sort of compare results. But you can choose any one of these windows, and in here, this is where we're going to begin to type our queries. So, for example, if I wanted to select everything from the books database, I type in select all from books. Now, to run this query, I have two options. The first one is to use this green arrow. That's the run statement. That will run a SQL statement. The other option is right here. It's this little piece of paper with a small green arrow, and that's run script. Now, run script is going to be used more when you're running several SQL statements all in a row. For example, whenever you want to rebuild your Just Lead Books database by using the build script, that's when you'll want to use the script table. This command is when you want to run a single SQL statement. This one is when you want to run a script, which is multiple SQL statements all in a row. So when you look at your build script, it has a lot of drop tables, create tables, insert commands. So instead of running each one of these individually using run statement, we'll use run script for that, and I'll show you that here in just a second. But for now, just to run this query, I want to make sure that my cursor, I'm actually going to separate this into two lines. I want to make sure that my cursor is somewhere within this query. If it's down here and I try to click run, it won't run anything. You actually have to click on the query and then click the run button for it to actually run. So I click run. I have query results down here. Now you may have by default some other windows open, such as DBMS output. It may look like this. You can just use the little small X to close that out. You don't need to see it. All you really want to see is the query result. So that shows me everything in the books table. Much nicer than looking at it on SQL Plus, isn't it? Another thing you can do is if I had multiple queries written in my worksheet here, and let's say I wanted to run this query and not this query. To do that, you can just simply highlight it, or you can just put your cursor on the query again to run the books, this select statement from books. If I want to run the author statement, I click on author and run it that way. And now you can see the results of my author query. So hopefully that makes sense. That way you can have multiple queries and you can flip between them and choose which statement that you want, which SQL statement you want to run. Okay, so from there, let's go ahead and run our database script to rebuild our database so we can work on Chapter 8. So I have the JLDB build 8 script. So this is the one that we need to do our homework in Chapter 8. I'm going to select it all. I'm going to paste it into the window, and you can see the whole thing is there. One other thing I want to show you, that I just noticed I don't have turned on mine is the row numbers. That's going to help you whenever you want to troubleshoot any error that you may have. I'm going to go in here to preferences because I'm going to be honest with you, I'm doing this off the cuff because I can't remember where the setting is. I think it's called line numbers right here. So if you go into preferences, let me show you how to do that again. If you go to tools, you go to preferences. Up here in the search menu, type in line, and you'll see in the code editor, or the code editor section, there is a box here called show line numbers. I'm going to check that and hit OK. And what that does is you can see over here on this side, now I see all my line numbers. So if I run a query and I get an error and it tells me, oh, there's an error on line 4, that's going to help me troubleshoot and know that I need to look at line 4 because the syntax error is likely somewhere right around line 4. Okay? So I have this script in my query worksheet here. And remember, when I want to run a script, I want to use this other button right here, the Run Script button. Okay? So whenever I click Run Script, watch what happens. There's a new window that opens up down here on the right. So I have query result over here, but I have my script output over here. And if I go look up through here, it is showing me the output of what is happening in my script. So you can see the first line is drop customers. It's dropping the customers table. Looks like I have a few errors here. Error starting at line 9, drop table account manager. It's saying, oh, this table doesn't exist. So for whatever reason, the database that I had set up previously, I didn't have an account manager table, probably because I never created it. So it's giving me errors, but you can see where it tells me line 9 is where the issue is. It makes it really easy to see when I look at line 9 that that's where the problem occurred. So created the customers table, it inserted data, and you can scroll on down through here and it shows you all the rows that were inserted. So this is a good tool down here when you look at your script output to be able to troubleshoot any issues that may have occurred with your script. So now I have my database set up again. I'm actually going to right click on this. I'm sorry, not on the connection, but on the tables, and click refresh just to make sure I have the latest tables here. So as you can see, I think the testing table is there now. It wasn't there before. So make sure you either reconnect to your database. You can also just click on reconnect, or you can refresh. Right click and hit refresh to make sure that you have the latest. You're seeing the latest information over here under your connections. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this worksheet. I don't want to save it. You can save it as a SQL file on your computer so you can reference it later if you want. Now, let's hop over into our Chapter 8 discussion. And I'm going to split this so that hopefully you can see both the PowerPoint and my SQL developer. So in Chapter 8, we're going to be talking a lot about where clauses, which is how we restrict our rows returned by the query. We're going to be talking about using mathematical comparison operators. We're going to be talking about using a comparison operator such as between. We're going to be looking at the in comparison operator, in comparison operator. We're going to talk about the like comparison operator, which allows us to use wildcards and search patterns in order to narrow down our query results that way. We're going to be talking about looking for null values, and then we're going to be talking about order by, and so that's how we sort our data in our query in a specific order. So let's talk really quick about the where clause. So the where clause syntax is very simple. You have to have the word where, obviously, because that is the clause, and then you're going to have the column name, a comparison operator, and then a value or column for comparison. Please remember that values are case sensitive. So if I'm looking in the books database and everything in all the book titles, I'm trying to, let's say, search for a specific book title. If I'm looking at the book titles and they're all uppercase, I need to make sure that the value that I'm typing in for comparison is also in uppercase. I'll show you what that means here in just a second. So let's look at an example here. So the where clause comes after the from. So we're going to do our select and then list the columns that we want to select from, and then the table that we want to select from. Then we can do our where clause, and we can say where a specific column. So we have our column name. That was the first thing we need. The comparison operator, which in this case is equals, the equal sign. And then we need the value or column for comparison. So the value they're looking for in this query is FL for Florida. So let's try that ourselves real quick. So select last name state from customers where state equals FL. And if I run this, I can see now here's all the customers who have a state of FL. Now we talked about how it has to be, it's case sensitive. If I do FL with a lowercase and I try to run it, I don't get any results. Or 2 lowercase letters, I don't get any results. Since the data is stored in uppercase, I have to make sure I use uppercase in my value or it's not going to return data. That's very important. It's a common mistake that a lot of people make. They think, oh, there's no results. Well, it's not that. It's just that you have messed up the case. Now, if you're going to use it in a where clause, if the value is a string, meaning it's alpha, it has alpha characters in it. It's not numeric. It's not a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If it has characters in it, it must be enclosed by single quotes. If you don't have the single quotes on there, it's not going to work. If I take this off, it's now assuming that it's a number. And when I try to run it, I'm going to get an error, invalid identifier. Error at line 3. There's line 3, column 15. It can't find it because it has to be in single quotes. Now, if this was a number, if I look here, so customer number, you see this is a data type of number. Let me look at a number here. Let's do select all. So let's say customer 1001 is Bonita Morales. If I come in here and I say where customer number equals 1001 and run it, I don't have single quotes. It returns the query. So whenever it's a numeric value, you don't need quotes. But if it's a string, you do. If it's a varchar type or a date, you have to have single quotes. You can actually put this in single quotes. It's still going to work, but oops, sorry, I clicked I clicked F5. It's still going to work when you run this, but the single quotes aren't necessary. Okay, so that's the basics of a where clause. Now, the comparison operator. So in this particular query, we had an equal sign, but this is not the only thing you can use. You can also use greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. So the example they're using here, select title retail from books, where retail is greater than 55. So if the value in retail is greater than 55, it's going to return a record. So here are the books that have a retail value of greater than 55. Okay, you could also do less than 55. If I change my comparison operator and run it, now I only see things that are less than 55. If it's equal to 55, it's not going to be in this list. So if there is a value that is equal to 55, which I'm not sure that there is, there's not. But if there was one, it would not be included in this result because we're using a less than. So, hi class, this is the second video for the Chapter 8 lecture for CIT 171. I apologize for having a second video. My PC froze up in the middle of my first video, and so instead of re-recording the entire lecture, I just wanted to go ahead and start a new video and pick up where we left off. So if you haven't watched the first video, please watch that first, or you might be lost because we're picking up right in the middle here. Hopefully it won't freeze up again, but if it does, I guess I'll just create a third video. Thank you for understanding, guys. Okay, so where we left off, we were talking about comparison operators and how we can use things like less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to restrict the data with our where clause. So we looked at if the retail column was less than 55 or greater than 55, it would show us those results in our query. Now, here is a list of mathematical operators, mathematical comparison operators that you can use. So equals, greater than, less than, not equal to can be done a few different ways. You can use a less than and greater than sign. You can use an exclamation point followed by an equal sign, or you can use a caret, that's that little arrow pointing up, and the equal sign to designate not equal to. So if you said cost is not equal to 55.95, you can use any one of these methods to represent not equal to. Then you have less than or equal to, which is the less than sign followed by the equal sign, and greater than or equal to. So you can use any of these operators in the where clause to query your data. Okay, so if I wanted to say retail is not equal to 55 over here, I put the not equal sign, and then I can run it, and it will show me everything where it's not equal to 55. Okay. The next thing we can do, there's other comparison operators besides greater than, less than. You can also use between or not between, in or not in, like nor not like, is null or is not null. So the between will say is an operator where you can say if the number is between 5 and 10. So you give it two different values, a range of values, and it will say, it will give you results for anything that is between those two numbers. You can also use not between 5 and 10. So give me everything that's not between 5 and 10. So if it's 4, 3, 2, 1, or 11, 12, 13, 14, it will return in your query. If you want to use the in operator, that is where you give it a list of numbers in parentheses or a list of values in parentheses. And if the value is in that list, it will return on the query, or not in that list. So they had an example here where if you said where pub ID in 1, 4, or 5, it will return books that have a publisher ID of 1, 4, or 5. If the value is not 1, 4, or 5, it will not be returned. The like operator is used when you want to search a pattern. So let's say you're looking in this books table over here and you want to find all titles that have the word Mickey in it. Well, so you can query and use the like operator to say, give me all of the queries where the title of the book is like Mickey, and you can use a wildcard operator we'll look at here in just a second, which is a percent sign to use the like operator. Lastly, we have is null or is not null. So if we want to quickly see which values in the table are null, meaning they have no value at all. Now it's not 0, it's null, which means that it's blank. You can use is null or is not null to find those values. Okay, let's look at them really quickly. So I'm going to do the same example they have here on the screen. Select title, pub ID from books, where pub ID is between 1 and 3. And if I run this, I now see only the values where it's between 1 and 3. Now, when you use between 1 and 3, it's also going to include the values of 1 and 3. If I had 1 and 2, you'll notice it will no longer have the 3's in there, but it'll only have the 1 and 2. So it's not saying between 1 and 3, which you would think would be a value of 2. It's basically you're going to be returning values that are either 1, 2, or 3. Okay, does that make sense? Hopefully it does. If not, please email. Hello guys, again this is actually the third video for chapter 8. I'm going to try to combine the videos, but if not I may just have to leave them as separate videos. My computer is not wanting to cooperate with me today. So when we left off we were talking about the between operator. I think we've covered that. I'm going to move on now to the in operator. So again, the in operator is going to return records that match a value in a specified list. So the list has to be in parentheses. And the values have to be separated by commas. Now these can be numbers or they can be string values. So if we look at the example in the slide deck here, instead of using between, I'm going to take that out and I'm going to say where the pub ID is in 1, 2, or 5. So if the value of pub ID is 1, 2, or 5, it's going to return in our query. If it's not, it will not return. So there you can see if we have a 1, a 2, or a 5, that has returned the value in this query. Now again, you can also say, you can also have strings here. So if you want to say where, let's say the title is in Revenge of Mickey, and remember this has to be all capitals, uppercase, or it will not find it, and shortest poems has to be in parentheses. Now when we run it, it's finding those two books, because those two book titles, because we listed them, and again they're strings and they have to be in single quotes. Okay, the like operator. The like operator is very cool. So it performs a pattern search. You can use wildcard characters such as underscore. Underscore will let you search for exactly one character in the indicated position. I'll show you that in just a second. Or the percent sign, which represents any number of characters. So hi class, once again I apologize. This would actually be the fourth video. Hopefully I'm going to combine all of these lectures videos together into one, but I apologize if it may skip around a little bit. I've rebooted my computer now. Hopefully that's going to resolve this issue, but if not, I will just keep on making videos and hopefully combine them all into one video lecture. But where I left off before my PC froze again, we were talking about the like operator, and how we have two different types of wildcards. We can use an underscore and we can also use a percent sign. Let me show you how the percent sign works first. So using the example in the slides, select last name from customers where the last name is like P%, and we have that in single quotes since it is a string. So what this is saying is give me all of the customers whose last names start with the letter P. They can, and what this percent wildcard does is it means any characters after the letter P, that can be any character, number, space, whatever. But if it starts with the letter P, if the value of last name starts with the letter P, and again, it's case sensitive, so it has to be an uppercase P, return that value. If it has any other characters before the P, it's not going to find it. So let's run this, and you can see we have two people who have a last name of Pearson and Perez. So it's only going to be if the last name begins with a P. If I had added a percent sign in front of the P, so what does that do? That says give me any last name which has a P in the last name somewhere. It can have characters before the P, it can have characters after the P, but if there's an uppercase P in this name, I want you to give it to me. So I'm going to run that, and now look, we have a third one in here, Thompson, because there are letters before the P and after the P, and so that is why it is included in the result. Now if I take this percent sign after the P away, this basically says give me anything, any last name that ends in a letter P. The last letter, the last character of this string has to be a P. No rows selected. Oops, sorry, and I hit the wrong button again. I'm going to run my statement. No rows were selected because it is nothing ends with no one has a last name that ends with P. Okay, so let me show you the other wildcard, which is the underscore. So let's say I want to, let's look at the books table. select all from books. Let's say that I want to find a title that has the first letter of the title. I'm sorry, let's say that it has the second character of a title is an O and the fourth character of the title is a Y. Very specific, I know, but let's just say I want to find anything where the second character is an O, the fourth character is a Y. So we should have bodybuilding, right? So if I do select all from books, where title, like, use our like operator, and we're going to say blank, using the underscore, O underscore for another blank, and then a Y. And then I want to get any character after it. So let me use a percentage sign. So let's talk about what this means. If the first character can be anything, it's a wildcard. The second character has to be an O. The third character is an underscore, which means it can be any character. The fourth character has to be a Y. And then after that, it can be any character at all. So that should bring back body build in 10 minutes a day. And oh, look, there may be one other one here, Holy Grail of Oracle. So let's run this. And there we go. So the first character can be any character, an H or a B. The second character has to be an O. The third character can be any character, so it can be a D or an L. And then the fourth character has to be a Y. And then anything after that. So in this case, it's a B. In this case, it's a space. So that's a way that you can use a like operator to narrow down even more, granularly the data that you want to return. Okay. All right. So we also have, instead of a comparison operator, we've talked about comparison operators: greater than, less than, or equal to, like, between, in, etc. We're also going to have logical operators. So logical operators are used to combine conditions. So this is a condition where title, like these wildcards here, we can combine this with other conditions as well using logical operators such as not, and or. So not reverses the meaning. We've seen that when we use not like. So if I do, or not between, or not in. So if I use not like, this is going to show me everything except for the bodybuilding book and the Holy Grail book, right? So not reverses the meaning. And, if you use an and, both conditions must be true. If you use an or, at least one of the conditions must be true. So let's take a look at an example for this, for using a logical operator. So I'm going to do select title, pub ID, and category from books. Now you may be wondering why category is blue here. That's because category is actually a keyword in Oracle. It's it can be used for other other statements that you use in Oracle. So it highlights it, but we can use it as since it's a field name, it's not going to cause an issue. The SQL developer just makes it blue because it can be used as a command, similar to selected from. Okay. So where pub ID equals 3 and category equals computer. So this, we have two comparisons here. First, we're using the where clause. We have to say where pub ID equals 3. We're going to combine that with the category equals computer. So you can write each one of these individually, but you can combine them to narrow your query results down even more. Now, since we're using the and logical operator here, that means both of these have to be true. If one of these is false, so if the pub ID is something, let's say the category is computer, that's true. But if the pub ID is something besides a 3, let's say it's a 1, it's not going to return in our query results. It's only going to return if the pub ID is 3 and the category is also computer. Both of these have to be true. So if I run this, I see there are the books where the pub ID is 3, the category is computer. If you see, if I change this to an or, now or, either one of these can be true. So the category could be computer, could be true, and the pub ID could be something else. Or the pub ID could be 3, and the category could be something else besides computer. So let's run this one. So now you can see that there's some records in here where the category is computer and the pub ID is something different. It's a 2. So either one can be used. So you have to really, whenever you're writing queries, you have to be really certain whenever you're combining these comparisons using logical operators that you use the correct one. You don't always want to use or, because if you use, and you can use multiple ors. You can or title like data. Or let's say the title, the title like data, that's fine. So when you combine these, any one of these 3 statements can be true and the result will be returned in the query. If you change this to an and, it's going to evaluate it as the pub ID can be 3, that can be true, or these 2 things have to be both true together. Okay, so it really can get tricky, and you really have to think about it logically on whether it's an and or an or, and what that means for these comparisons being true or false. Okay? All right, so let's move to the or. Okay, we talked about or. Here we go. So this is what I was talking about, multiple logical operators. They're resolved in this order, not and then or. So first it's going to make sure that it's going to resolve the and. Then it's going to resolve. So these 2 things have to be true. Category has to equal computer, and title has to be like data. Once those things are both true, then it looks at the pub ID. So these things together have to be true, or this has to be true. I know that can be confusing. Try to think through it. If you have any questions, let me know. But that's about the best way I can explain it. They resolved in the order of not, and then or. So you can use parentheses to override the order of evaluation. So let's take a look at that. Select all from books where category equals family life or pub ID equals 4 and cost is greater than 15. So what are we doing here? Because we put these in parentheses, this or, it's going to evaluate this first and then evaluate the and. If we didn't have the parentheses there, it's going to give us completely different results. Remember, it evaluates it as not, and then or. So let's see what happens when we run this query. Category equals family life, or pub ID equals 4, and cost equals 15. So you can see here, we definitely have categories other than family life. We definitely have pub IDs other than 4. And the cost is both less than and greater than 15. So what happened here? So we're saying the first thing is that these have to be true. So pub ID equal to 4, and the cost has to be greater than 15. So that's why these records are here. Or, so that's true, but then also it evaluates the or. So the category family life, that can also be true. So that's why you also see family life in here as well. When we add the parentheses back in, so that it evaluates these comparisons first, and then it will evaluate the and. So it combines these 2, then it uses the and operator. We'll see what the results are. So now we see any record, any book where the category is family life, or the pub ID equals 4, and the cost is greater than $15. So because of the and operator and both of these things on either side of the and this have to be true, you see all of the costs are greater than 15 because this has to be true. Okay, it could definitely get tricky, but if you play around with it and practice it, you'll start to understand more and more. Okay, so again, we have mathematical operators, comparison operators, and logical operators that we've talked about. All right. Now let's talk about null values. So null is again the absence of data, meaning there's nothing there. Requires the use of the is null operator. So let's look at one. Select order number, ship date from orders where ship date is null. Fix my typo. When I run this, we're going to see this is where the ship date is null. Okay, so if I want to define, okay, which orders haven't shipped out yet because there is no ship date, I can use where ship date is null and quickly find which orders have not actually been shipped or that don't have a ship date. I can also use is not null, and now I only see the ones that have shipped. Okay, so that's the way we can use the null operator. Common error is using equals null, which is not, doesn't raise an Oracle error, but it doesn't return any rows. So you cannot say where ship date equals null. In Oracle, that won't work. It's not going to return any values. You have to use the operator is or is not null. Okay. Hey class, well I hope that had fixed it when I rebooted my computer, but it just froze up on me again. So I have yet another starting point here in the video. Again, I'm hoping that I'm going to be combining these and it's not going to be 5 or 6 separate videos, but here we're starting up again. Where we left off when it cut off last time, we had just finished talking about the logical operators and how we handle null values. And for the rest of this chapter, we're going to be looking at how we order our data using the order by clause. So the order by clause presents data in a sorted order. Ascending order is the default. So by default, all of your data is going to be sorted in an ascending order, so from smallest to largest. The descending keyword, DESC, that will override a column default, and you can have 255 columns maximum in your order by. So in ascending order, values will be listed in the following sequence: numeric values first, then character values, then null values. When you do descending, it's reversed. So it's null values, then character values, and then numeric values. So let's look at an example here. Let me type this one in. Select last name, first name, state, city, from customers where state is in FLCA. Let's run this first, just to see what it looks like. Oh, I forgot a single quote, so I can see error is at line 3. And now if I run it again, okay, so there I have my customers who are in Florida or California, but they're not in any sort of order, right? You have Florida, California, Florida, California, Florida, Florida, California. They're also not ordered by last name or first name, but we can add in after the where statement, order by, and we can order it by state. Now by default, it's going to do it in an ascending order. So C is the first, comes before F in the alphabet, so all the Californias are listed first, right? If I wanted to change that to where it's in descending order, I type in order by state, DESC, and now it's going to reverse it, and it's going to do Florida first and then California. Now, I can also sort multiple columns. So I've sorted it by state, but what if I also then wanted to sort it by city? Because it's ordered by Florida, has Florida first, but Miami, Claremont, Tallahassee, and East Point are not in any sort of order. So I could do a comma and put in city, and now when I run it, it's ordered in the state is descending order, so it has Florida first, but then the city is in ascending order. So it first sorts by state, then it sorts by city. And so I see city, Claremont, East Point, Miami, Tallahassee are in alphabetical order, as well as Burbank and Santa Monica. Okay, so you can have up to 255 columns in here that you're going to sort. I highly doubt you'll ever have that many, but it is possible. And again, you can sort in ascending or descending order. I could add descending here to city, and now both of these columns are in descending order. I could also then add another column such as last name, and we can make that ascending. So hopefully this time, instead of it starting with S, hopefully it will start with N. Did it do that? Let's see, let me try that again. Oh, it's doing state, and then it's doing the city is in descending order, and then oh yeah, and that makes sense because it's not going to sort after city has been sorted, the last name and first name, they're just tied to that state, so they're going to have to be in that order because Layla Smith is in Tallahassee, and Tallahassee is being sorted. Okay, so that wasn't a good example, but you could add multiple columns in here if you wanted to, and you can rearrange these. So you could move city to be in the front, and it could sort it by city first in descending order, and then by state. Okay, so that's order by. Let's see if we have anything else we need to do. Oh, we can order it by column position. So instead of using the column name, we can use a column position. So we can order by 3 descending. So column 3 is 1, 2, 3. That's state. So if I order by column 3 descending, you can see the state is now in descending order. And then I can do a comma and I can specify 4, which will make the city. And since I don't specify descending, it's going to be ascending order. So you can do it by column position as well. Not super common, but sometimes people do use that format. Okay, I think that's it for this chapter. So a quick summary, we've talked about the where clause and how it can be used in the select statement to restrict rows that are returned by the query. We've talked about searching non-numeric fields. The search values must be enclosed in single quotation marks. So if it's non-numeric, if it's a string, it has to be inside single quotes. Then we talked about comparison operators, such as greater than, less than, equal to, between, in, like. We've talked about all of those comparison operators and how to use them. We've also talked about logical operators, such as and or, and how you can combine several different search conditions using those, but you have to be careful because they're evaluated in a certain order. In the and logical operator, all conditions must be true. If it's an or, only one of the conditions must be true. Then we talked about how to look at null values. So null means there's an absence of data, it's blank, there's nothing there, no value at all. And how we can use is null or is not null to be able to return records that have null values. And then lastly, we talked about ordering our data. So we can sort it using the order by clause we can order it in ascending or descending order, and we can do it by column position, or we can do it by column name. Okay, so I hope that was, sorry for all of the technical issues that I had in this video. Hopefully it's all going to come together here. If you guys have any questions at all, always feel free to email me. Hopefully you're going to enjoy using Oracle SQL Developer. If you have any questions or issues getting SQL Developer working correctly, please let me know. And yes, email me if you have any questions, and thank you and have a good day. Bye-bye.